This is the door card that came with my Sportline interior. Obviously, I can't use it like this, as it's falling to pieces. And this is the door card that was originally fitted to my red project. The keen eye would have noticed that one is for electric seats and the other is for manual. Clearly, I'm going to need to modify it, so let's go to the hardware store. First things first, I need to see out of my windscreen. So at the hardware store, I decided on purchasing a Dremel. It wasn't entirely my own decision. I had discussed with someone I know called Yam, who gave me the great idea. I was going to use a box cutter, but I probably would have had limited success or completely screwed it up. This is the one that I settled on purchasing. And what better vehicle to drive to the hardware store than my 124? And this is that great West Australian icon known as Bunnings. Now this is my first Dremel. I've never used one in my life. You can skip ahead if you're not interested, but I'm going to unbox it here and see exactly what these 30 accessories are that come with it. You can see it on the back, but it's nowhere near as exciting as opening it up and looking at it in person. First I have to work out how the hell to open the box. Easier said than done when you're working with one hand. Now obviously there's more than what I require in here, so this will come in handy in future. I've got a couple of cut-off discs here, and even smaller ones in there as well. Various sanding attachments, even something to polish, something to grind. I'm sure I'll have uses for this. Might even see how it polishes aluminium with this polishing compound. I don't really get into polishing engine parts and that because I like to drive my cars. And what's the point if it's not going to stay looking good? This is obviously the 240 volt version if you're not familiar, because Australia is a 240 volt country. These are the two trims side by side, the electric seat version on the right that is completely screwed, and the manual version on the left. So we need to make this enormous hole in the manual seat version right here. And this is the back side, and as you can see, this unit is completely screwed. It's even got screws in the handle, so it's obviously been junk for some time and someone has tried to make it last a bit longer. And this is the manual seat version, and you will notice that MB obviously realised that we would be screwing around with these cars in 30 years time, and they've put a cutout there for us to conveniently modify this manual seat trim to accept the electric seat switches. The first thing we need to do is remove this quote-unquote wood trim from this door trim. They are simply 7mm nuts. Now I'm too lazy to use a hand tool, so I'm just using my electric screwdriver with a 7mm nut driver attached to it. Try as I might, for some reason this nut would not separate from the trim. It's not still holding the wood, but the door card itself, I don't know why it stayed on there and I never did get it off. But who cares, it still works. That nut is just not budging. I then got started with the Dremel, using the cut-off wheel. Interesting to note, I don't know what these trims are made out of, but the smoke that comes off this material smells like fine cigars, so it's not at all unpleasant. And yes, that is the carpet in my house. I don't care, that's what vacuum cleaners are for, so all of the sawdust did just vacuum up after this operation quite easily. The only real problems I had are in these tight corners, and some of the places where the Dremel just would not fit. But all of the long sections were pretty easily done. You just have to pay attention because these aren't completely straight lines. There are some sections that are lower and some that are higher. You just follow the cutout and you can't really go wrong. Surprisingly, the vinyl trim on the other side cut perfectly. With this cut-off disc, there was no ragged edges or anything like that. It cut just as well through that as it did through the wood material. I'm cutting this section off because this is one of these areas that requires a bit of extra detail. It's not exactly a straight line. And I'll deal with that later. And this is just me finishing off with the box cutter because I could not get the Dremel into that area. Maybe I could with the extension Bowden cable thing that it comes with, but I didn't think of that at the time. And it's too late now anyway. And that seems to have done the job. One word of caution with this rough sanding attachment, it is absolutely brutal and it takes off way more material than you're expecting. It is very fast at removing this material, so you have to be very careful. If you go too far, you've ruined the door card. You'll end up with a gap around the trim cover for the electric seats, and that's just going to look ugly. I finished off with this finer grade abrasive device. I'm not sure what the hell it is. It seemed to work well for tidying this up. So I then needed to salvage the wood trim off the electric seat door card. For some reason these nuts were ridiculously tight. It's almost as if someone has applied Loctite to the threads because they just did not want to come off easily. Whereas the other ones just spun off with no effort at all. And there we have it, one removed wood trim. That is the short version for electric seats. Now I will install it on my freshly modified front driver's door card. This is what the modified door card now looks like after a thorough cleaning. I will say that it was absolutely filthy, and it took quite a lot of effort to get it reasonably clean. It's almost as if some kind of baboons were living in this car at some stage. I know it wasn't the Air Force pilot that left it like this, it was the people that owned it after him. And I just quickly applied some 303 aerospace protectant, and I will let that dry like I have done with the other trims. They all match perfectly now.